So here is a D&D Homebrewed campaign origins story. It was at the millennial celebration for the foundation of the great city of Balthus that King Delanor declared the continent of Ambar to be tamed. There were delegates from all the city-states, all the 5 civilized races of Ambar, attending a great month-long celebration. And at the final feast, Delanor said that the continent now had peace, prosperity. The frontier was done. And the delegates certainly believed this, and the populace believed this, for they could see with their eyes. Trade flowed between the city-states. The various creatures and savage humanoid races that had once terrorized the citizens of Ambar, they had all been relegated to distant corners of the continent. Trading ships sailed up and down, bringing the bounty of the land to all the city-states. It was peaceful. The future looked bright. But it was at this very moment, at this apex of peace and prosperity, that a legend began to circulate among those who considered adventuring the noblest profession. It was an old story of a fabled continent far to the east. The elves called this continent Melanor, which means home, because they thought, for their legend said, that the elves had come across the sea from the east. But most people considered this just a fable, because those that had traveled beyond the farthest reaches of the continent, the Isles of Azurtane, in search of this land, they had never returned. But still this legend grew, because people sought out a new chance for the adventuring and wealth and glory that had come with the conquering of Ambar. Then, as often happens with events of historical importance, it was a chance accident that led to the discovery of this continent. There was a merchant by the name of Kroll who was on a trading mission to the Isles of Azurtane, and he ran into a huge storm. And the storm blew him far to the east of Azurtane. And once the storm subsided, the winds were still blowing to the east. And Kroll realized that the provisions they had, they could not fight these winds, and he told his men, "We have to continue to sail east." And so they did. And the days turned into weeks. They ran out of provisions. They were drinking rainwater off the sails. The men were threatening to mutiny. But Kroll spurred them on. He told them, "We have no choice. We have to sail east." And then one day, a day that is now celebrated every year as Landing Day, they sighted a strip of coastline. And they had discovered this lost continent. Kroll named it Melanor in honor of the elves, and when he returned to Ambar, he was suddenly the most famous person in the land, the great discoverer. He had proven this legend true, and soon many others followed, looking for a chance to build a new world for themselves, looking to start it fresh, looking for adventure, looking for wealth. But the thing that Melanor offers the most promise is for a setting for your homebrewed campaign. Hello again, my name is K.R. King, and this is my YouTube channel on starting a homebrewed campaign, in which I go over some of the techniques I've used to start up homebrewed campaigns fairly quickly with a basic concept, and then I build it with the players kind of organically as we go along. So what I outlined in my origin story there was the Frontier campaign. This is the undiscovered continent, much like historically we see the discovery of the New World, and I say that with quotations since there were indigenous people already there. But basically much of the land has not been populated in terms of cities or huge settlements from, as I mentioned here in Ambar, we call the so-called civilized tribes. These would be humans, elves, halflings, gnomes, and dwarves. So they come to this land and they sort of create a new society with the remnants of the old. So this is kind of a new world concept. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do here is I got to decide right away, how long has it been since the discovery of Melanor, the new continent, by Kroll the merchant? And what I'm thinking is 200 years. And the reason I do that is I'm thinking I want the player characters who've grown up in Melanor and grown up in the starting city. This is their home. Many generations have grown up here. They consider this their home. Also, it gives the population enough time to get a toehold onto the continent. So the indigenous population is going to be orcs, goblins, trolls, all the typical monsters from the monster manual and humanoid races. And they've been pushed back from the coast enough to have a few settlements. But we don't have to do a lot of settlements. We don't have to chart out a lot of areas where the various races that the player characters are going to have settled. And this makes it easier to start off with a frontier campaign. I'm going to have maybe 3 major settlements and then some villages and things. And I'll have a few geographic features that have been identified in the continent, but I'm not going to worry too much about beyond, a certain 50-mile or whatever radius from the various settlements. I'm just going to concentrate on that. And that makes it easier to sort of conceive of and plan out. So, again, an advantage here is you have a low population density with a frontier campaign. You don't have to work on that much in terms of, who are the leading families or personages of the various settlements, the temples. We're going to put some specials in. We'll have a dungeon complex, and we'll have a few geographic hexes that might be interesting for the players to visit. But I don't have to do a whole continent. Now, another thing about the frontier campaign is there's tons of unexplored territory, where none of the various races of the player characters have ever been. And so this gives you all sorts of opportunity to create all sorts of specials, lost temples or cities or, magic items and complexes, any kind of thing you want to do. And the players will always have that thrill of being the first one to explore this. And as I mentioned in my introduction, you have groups of people that have come to Ambar for different reasons. And this is important in terms of when you decide on your settlements. Some people have just come for wealth and fame and to strike it rich. Others just to make a new life for themselves. Maybe they weren't doing well in Ambar, or things didn't turn out well for them. Some, again, we have religious considerations, all sorts of things. Very much the way the continent of the Americas were settled when this was discovered. So we're going to use a lot of stuff from the 5e rules. I'm going to use the Pantheon, the Greyhawk Pantheon. The character classes are going to be very similar in terms of the paths and things that you can do if you want to use some of the Xanthar rules, whatever. This is all going to be sort of inherited from Ambar. This is where the gods came from, the worship of them, etc. But by having a frontier continent, you may discover new gods, you may discover new mysteries, but you don't have to do it right away. And that's the key here. You're not going to necessarily be overwhelmed with trying to populate this. Another thing about the frontier is you're going to have mysteries. And what the biggest mystery is going to be, why are there none of the civilized races, the humans, elves, gnomes, dwarves, and halflings, on the continent of Melanor? Especially the elves are going to be mystified because in their legends say this is where the elves came from. But so far in the 200 years, I'm not going to have any of these races seen. There's a couple reasons for this. One is you have this, when you indigenous population, they're going to be exploited by the colonists, right? You saw this in the New World. And I don't necessarily want to have 2 tiers of society. I don't want to have an indigenous population, let's say they don't have as much levels of civilization or sophistication, and they're totally exploited by, or they're just there and they just kind of welcome you, with open arms, but they already have their own civilization. I'm not going to have that. I'm going to have other humanoid races, the indigenous residents, and they're going to be resentful of the humans and the elves and whatever coming from Ambar. And this is going to set up some nice conflict between them. The humans have had 200 years to push these other humanoids and other monsters back into the wilderness. But again, you have this ongoing conflict. I'm doing this from a sort of meta gaming aspect, but also I set up this potential mystery that I don't have to solve right away. I don't have to necessarily know, well, where are the civilized races of humanoids? What happened? I'll figure it out as I go along. And this is the great thing when you set up this frontier campaign, and just my methodology is I don't have to have all the answers right away. The players are going to start with a fairly small sphere of influence at lower levels. And then as they move out and as I work on the campaign, because you got to keep working on this campaign all the time. If you don't, your players will see it when you start to run out of ideas. But at the beginning, when their sphere of influence is pretty small, you don't have to worry too much about these grand mysteries. And then in addition to mysteries, which are things that don't make sense that are known by the people that have settled on Melanor, I'm also going to have secrets, because secrets are great for characters and they're great for places. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have a lost civilization that at one time was on this continent, but there are no remnants, at least easily seen right away. And then as we move along, I'm going to reveal different aspects of this lost civilization, but at the beginning it's going to be sort of unknown. In fact, I'm going to do a metagaming thing where as the players enter the world, first level, I think I'm going to start this, but you might start 3rd or 5th or whatever you prefer. But in that moment, when the players begin to interact with the world, slowly the secrets of this lost civilization are going to be revealed, at first to very select groups. This kind of information is going to be jealously guarded, but we're going to start to see something's going on here. Something happened here. So there was some kind of a civilization that existed before. And again, this becomes a potential storyline for the campaign from start to finish, that the discovery of these places and magic items, and for the players to explore this new continent, to explore this place. It's going to be fun. It's going to be they're the first to find this, and they're competing with other characters. As we begin to develop the characters, the NPCs and the monsters and whatnot, they come into competition. Sometimes they cooperate, but these secrets and these mysteries are really good fodder to have storylines and to have goals and objectives for the players and for the NPCs who are potentially competing with them. So I've got my concept frontier campaign. The next thing I always like to do, before I start to populate the world with various NPCs, monsters, and whatnot, and start to work out the relationships between these characters, I like to get a map. It's sort of like whenever I would read a fantasy novel, starting with the Bible of D&D, Lord of the Rings, the map at the front of the book, and you look at the map and you check it, and where are the characters moving to, and how far away are things, and what does the land look like. And also a map has a personality of its own. The land is a character too, and this place is a character. It's raw, it's frontier, it's untamed. The people that have come to this place have a certain ethos that's different than those that stay behind in Ambar. So you can create a map in any number of ways. If you're just going to do a tabletop campaign, you may just want to do with pen and ink kind of thing, just to have a piece of paper. I like to have a map that's on my computer for a number of reasons. First of all, I can use various graphics programs if I want to track the progress of the players. I've just always got it there on my computer. But also, if you're going to run a web-based campaign, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, something like that, it's great to have the map on the computer to be able to import it. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some cities out, some towns, cities, some settlements. I'm going to do some geographic things, the things that the player characters would know about. Having grown up in this place, whether it's first or third or however level you're starting, how much would they know? And we'll talk about that later too, depending on what level you start them at. They'll have a general idea of the three major settlements and some of the villages, some of the geographic features, but a lot of it is jealously guarded. And they're going to have to map their way through because, again, time and distance, where are we going? So we've got our frontier concept, now let's make a map.